Hello lovely people and welcome to your ultimate revision guide for GCSE Buddhism. In today's lesson we are going right back to where it all begins, the miraculous birth of the Buddha and the life of luxury that he walked away from. For Buddhists, these stories aren't just background information, they are actually the core foundations of Buddhist belief. They're full of meaning and you can use these throughout the exam on lots of different parts of the Dharma and also Buddhist practices. So let's start by looking at what you're going to take away with you today, the success criteria. You're going to be able to explain 2 Buddhist beliefs about the birth of the Buddha. That could be for a 6-mark question. Explain 2 Buddhist beliefs about the Buddha's life of luxury, also for a 6-mark question. Explain 2 ways belief in the Buddha and the life of luxury influence Buddhists today. That would be for a 4-mark influence question on beliefs. And of course, the 12-mark evaluation questions, you're going to evaluate some statements relating to the Buddha's birth and life of luxury. Unless you have studied the whole course, it will be very hard to evaluate statements in the first few lessons. So come back to the evaluation maybe at a later stage. So before Siddhartha was born, Queen Maya had a powerful dream. This is his mother. A white elephant entered her womb or side. And Buddhists believe this isn't simply a fairy tale. It's a sign. It's a sign that a child destined not only for ordinary greatness, but for spiritual awakening would be born. His father, King Suddhodana, was told this child would either become a great king or a great holy man. And this is really where the story takes off. Now, King Suddhodana and Queen Maya were king and queen in an area that is now in modern-day Nepal, but back in the time was part of ancient India. And they were leaders of a clan called the Shakyamuni clan. They had rice farming tribes. This is one of the reasons why the Buddha was later known as Shakyamuni Buddha, because there are other Buddhas, like Amitabha Buddha, for example, but Shakyamuni Buddha is the historical Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, as he was called at his birth. And the prophecy, the holy sages that said he was going to become a great king or a great holy man at one point, they listened to the dream. It was the time of dream as well. It was a full moon at a certain part of night, and the story of the Buddha's birth and the 32 marks on the Buddha's body of a great man. It was the great sages and later a holy man called Asita that spoke to King Suddhodana, prophesying the future Buddha's greatness. King Suddhodana was concerned, however. He didn't want his son to either be a great king or a great holy man. He wanted him to be the great king. So King Suddhodana did ask the holy advisor, Asita, who would decide. And Asita's response was, you would decide, King Suddhodana. So as you can imagine, King Suddhodana did absolutely everything in his power as king and father to raise his child up in a way that's not going to help him become a holy man, but instead a powerful great king, as we'll look at in a minute. So, Siddhartha was born in Lumbini on a full moon in the month of May under the branches of a sala tree. Lumbini was a forest. Queen Maya was on her way to Kapilavastu, which is where her parents lived, which was part of the culture and custom at the time. And he was born in the soft light of a full May moon. He wasn't an ordinary baby, and the Pali Canon records him standing up, taking 7 steps, and declaring, I am born for the sake of a supreme purpose. This is my last rebirth on this earth. Now pause a second and think about that. From his very first breath, the Buddha's mission was liberation from suffering, liberation from the cycle of life, death and rebirth, achieving great enlightenment and passing on to nirvana, not just for himself, but for the destiny of all human beings and other sentient beings too. Each of those steps that blossomed, a lotus flower rose from the ground. These were a symbol of purity, peace, and enlightenment. Obviously, if you get a 6-mark question, it's very useful to help explain those points by talking about the symbolism. Another key important part is a sala tree bent its branch down. Now this could point to nature welcoming in the birth of the Buddha. Again, a miraculous event. As he said the words, "This is my last rebirth on this earth," he does point up to the heavens and down to the earth, showing the link between life, death, and rebirth. Also, one final note, Queen Maya is believed to have almost a painless birth. Be careful to use the word almost. Dukkha is an inevitable part of life. Suffering is an inevitable part of life for all sentient beings. So the Buddha didn't say that she had a painless birth, but the fact that it was almost painful holds that symbolism, that belief that that's what the Buddha's goal, journey would be, his quest to liberate us from suffering. Okay, so the Buddha's birth influences Buddhists in many ways. Think of influences as inspired actions or emotions. How would it make a Buddhist feel, or what would it make a Buddhist do if they believe the story of the birth of Buddha? So one of the things is they could celebrate Wesak. Wesak is a big festival celebrated by Buddhists worldwide. They release lanterns, for example, symbolizing his future enlightenment as prophesied at his birth. Wesak is a festival that connects Buddhists to the birth of the Buddha, the enlightenment of the Buddha, and the death of the Buddha. They could also go on a sacred path or pilgrimage to the place he was born, Lumbini. As you can see on the image, there's a white building, a monument there, called a stupa. This is believed to hold relics of the Buddha. So Buddhists often walk around the stupa 3 times in honor of the 3 jewels: the Buddha, the Buddha's teachings, the Dharma, and the Buddhist community, the Sangha. They might recite the Triratna when they do this. I seek refuge in the Buddha, I seek refuge in the Dharma, I seek refuge in the Sangha, to make them feel at peace and comforted and protected by the Buddha, his teachings, and the community. Buddhists might also meditate of gratitude, thanking the Buddha for his birth and showing people the way to enlightenment. They might read the scriptures and reflect on the Buddha's message. They might bring offerings to a shrine. A Buddha Rupa is a statue on a shrine that they might show gratitude and devotion to. An example might be offerings of flowers or incense. Flowers showing anicca, incense showing purity of the Dharma. Candles, again, showing enlightenment. So Siddhartha was raised in 3 magnificent palaces, one for each season. Everything was provided for him. He later said, "I was delicately nurtured." He was surrounded by lotus ponds, fine food, music, and beauty. Beautiful dancing ladies for his entertainment. He was sheltered from sickness, death. There was no suffering. Even the path ahead of him was cleared. A man walked ahead, hiding dead plants and insects. No old age, no pain, no reminders of what we would assume real life to be. But even then he felt something was missing. Siddhartha looked around and knew. The Pali Canon says, "The household life is narrow and dusty. The life of renunciation is wide open." So we had 3 palaces, one for the summer or hot season, one for the cold season, and one for the monsoon or rainy season. The really good quote on here, number 2, delicately nurtured, shows how his father protected him from suffering. The hiding of dead leaves, sick animals were hidden away, just so he wasn't tempted to go down that spiritual path. and how you can explain the lotus ponds of many colours and the dancing ladies for his entertainment and all the great food he had, etc., that is listed in the Pali Canon, is his wealth and life of luxury gave him the pleasures, the sensual pleasures of life. He was in this palace for 29 years. And the next part of the story is he rejected this life. And I think what's really important is if you get a question on the life of luxury in the exam, you do need to skip ahead a bit and talk about how he rejected this life of luxury. Don't talk just simply about how wonderful this life was. He actually rejected it. He rejected it after seeing the 4 sights, which we're going to talk about in the next session, but also after he lived the ascetic life too. So the moments of the life of luxury, these 29 years of his life, matter to Buddhists. It's these years that Buddhists still carry with them today. They teach them to not be trapped by wealth, because even if there's no old age, sickness and death, you still suffer. Suffering is part of life. Kings suffer, queens suffer, prince and princesses suffer. It taught him to follow the middle way, so Buddhists too might also follow the middle way, not living a very harsh life, not living a very indulgent life, living somewhere in the middle. So he rejected this indulgent, rich, wealthy life, as we can get too distracted, we can get too greedy. It helps Buddhists let go of greed and attachment and distractions. This is where the Buddha's journey really began, by walking away from everything he had to find something far greater. Buddhists might do the same. They might leave their own homes and go on a retreat for a week or a month, living in a Buddhist monastery, a vihara, doing chores and living very simple life without belongings and their telephone and family around them, to escape the difficulties and sufferings of this life and really focus on what matters to them as Buddhists. So here's some quick fire questions. Question 1, multiple choice. Where was the Buddha born? And the answer, of course, is Lumbini. Lumbini there. And another multiple choice question. Which festival celebrates the birth of the Buddha? And yes, the answer here is B, Wesak. Now you can get asked 1-mark questions that have no multiple choice options. Here is an example of one. What was the Buddha's name at birth? And the answer, of course, is Siddhartha Gautama. Another example. Give one reason why the Buddha rejected his life of luxury. So on this answer, there's more than one reason. But the question very clearly says one reason and you get 1 mark. Listing more than one reason is pointless because you only get marked for the first one you actually write in the test. So here, the princely life still brought about suffering, or dukkha. But you could also say to fulfill Asita's prophecy. He was influenced later by the 4 sights. He wanted to learn more about the world, about the truth, about gaining wisdom. And then you've got 4-mark influence questions. If you want to hit 4 out of 4, you need to give 2 distinctive beliefs, 2 different beliefs about whatever the question is, in this case, the birth of Buddha, and then you need to link them to real influences or actions that Buddhists do based on that belief. Please do pause the video and have a go at that question. Okay, here is an example of an answer. The Buddha was born in Lumbini Forest. There's a point. This makes Buddhists, there's a connection between a belief and they're going on to talk about something that Buddhists do. This makes Buddhists go on pilgrimage to Lumbini and walk around the stupa to show gratitude and respect. The Buddha was born on a full moon in May. This makes Buddhists celebrate Wesak, that's supposed to say every May, by releasing lanterns to show he eventually became enlightened. So two beliefs with connections that say this make Buddhists, and then two influences, emotions or actions that Buddhists do because of that belief. Here is another example of a 4-mark influence question. Explain 2 ways belief in the Buddha's life of luxury influences Buddhists today. Please pause the video and have a go. Okay, and here is a model answer. The Buddha rejected his life of luxury after seeing the 4 sights. Remember earlier in this video I said please talk about him rejecting his life of luxury. This makes Buddhists go on their own journey where they live a simple and mindful life following the Buddha's example. They might release and let go of possessions. The Buddha was deluded by his sensual pleasures in the palaces. This makes Buddhists try not to surround themselves with too many sensual pleasures, as this can distract them from the goal and in finding the middle way. You could talk about them not having second helpings of dessert, etc. Okay, a 6-mark question is in front of you here. Explain 2 Buddhist beliefs about the birth of Buddha. Refer to sacred writing or another source of Buddhist belief and teaching. 6 marks. So how do you get the 6 marks for these questions? The first 2 marks are exactly the same. You give 2 straightforward, simple beliefs about the birth of Buddha. But this time, instead of giving influences, you just need to develop these points, giving examples, giving a further development of a particular point. Maybe using connectors like because or this shows or as. Maybe giving a quote. In fact, one of these points you also need to give a quote and apply it to the question. When you give the quote, you must, and it is essential you do this, name the source of Buddhist belief and teaching. In most cases on Buddhism, it is the Pali Canon. Not all cases, but in these lessons today it has been. So pause the video, have a go, and then look at the model answer. Okay, in front of you is a model answer, and at the bottom is a key showing you what the different colours mean as parts of the answer. The Buddha was born in Lumbini Forest and immediately spoke is the start of the first paragraph, and the start of the second is the Buddha also walked 7 steps as he was born with lotus flowers blossoming at each step. These 2 points are your 2 main beliefs that you're going to be talking about. That's where you get your first 2 marks. The next part highlights the Pali Canon says the Buddha said, "This is my last rebirth on this earth." Not only have they given a quote, they have said where that quote is found. That is essential for that additional mark there. The light blue shows the developments of the points being made. So this shows that the Buddha would eventually break free from samsara and pass on to nirvana. However, in the point where you've given the quote and named the source, you also have to apply how that quote applies right back to the question, in this case the birth of Buddha. So here it says, therefore this quote shows his birth prophesies that he would become a great spiritual holy man. The second point does not need a quote, although you might feel that you can still explain giving an example of a quote from a Pali Canon or other scripture. In this case they haven't. The Buddha also walked 7 steps as he was born with lotus flowers blossoming at each step. The lotus flowers symbolize enlightenment, so prophesied his future liberation. Here is another example of a 6-mark beliefs question. Explain 2 Buddhist beliefs about the Buddha's life of luxury. Refer to sacred writing or another source of Buddhist belief and teaching. Pause and have a go and then look back at the model answer. Okay, so here is an example of a model answer. Again, we've got 2 points. We've got a source, and you can see delicately nurtured there from the Pali Canon is quoted. Both points have development, and the first point is talking about how the quote given applies back to the original statement in the question. The Buddha lived in 3 palaces and was sheltered away from pain and suffering. The Pali Canon says the Buddha was delicately nurtured. An example of this is that his father employed a man to walk ahead of him, hiding any dead animals or plants. Therefore, this quote shows his life of luxury was designed to nurture the prince to become a great king. The Buddha also experienced many sensual desires. Examples include being entertained by beautiful dancing ladies and having lotus ponds of many colours. And of course, you could get some evaluation statements. Here are 2 of them, 12 marks each. The Buddha's birth story is only a myth, and the Buddha didn't need to live a life of luxury. Now bear in mind, if you have not studied the whole of Buddhism as yet, this will be very difficult to attempt because there are other elements of the course that could be useful on these questions. For example, Wesak and festivals in the story of the birth of the Buddha that are taught in Buddhist practices. A lot of the Buddhist teachings that might reflect back on the life of luxury. However, some of the ideas that you could bring into this. So for the first statement, the Buddha's birth story is only a myth. The story includes supernatural events. Walking at birth, speaking immediately, lotus flowers blossoming from his feet. All of these do seem a little bit illogical, irrational, superstitious, and not all Buddhists will have this literal understanding of it. Some Buddhists, however, say that the symbolic truth is the part that matters, not the facts, but the meanings behind the facts. So the lotus flowers symbolizing his future enlightenment. The 32 signs of a great man symbolizing the prophecy that was predicted to become a great spiritual holy man. An argument against is the story is preserved in the Pali Canon. It's one of the most ancient and trusted scriptures. And another argument against is it teaches deep truths. So rebirth, liberation, the path to nirvana. Dismissing it as myth merely misses the real deep spiritual truths that might be found in that statement. In your conclusion, you could say, even if it didn't happen exactly the way that the scriptures tell you, it still reveals truths about the Buddha's mission, and that gives it lasting meaning. On the second statement, the Buddha didn't need to live a life of luxury. For an argument 4, you could say he could have understood suffering by leaving earlier. He did live that life of luxury for 29 years. Imagine how much more Dharma could be taught if he had done it much earlier. You could say the palaces delayed his path. The beautiful dancing ladies and the lotus ponds of many colours distracted him from gaining wisdom, gaining that truth. Arguments against, you could say, without living the life of luxury and later on the life of an ascetic, he would have never understood the middle way, which is about avoiding extremes. In this case, the extreme of luxury and indulgence and wealth. Without living in luxury, he wouldn't understand emptiness, that all things are empty within themselves. A very, very important Mahayana belief in sunyata. An example of an evaluation is, by walking away from luxury, Siddhartha proved that even the most comfortable life cannot answer life's deepest questions. Okay, so some key points to take away with you from session 1 here. We have Siddhartha Gautama is also known as Shakyamuni Buddha, the son of King Suddhodana and Queen Maya. Asita's prophecy was for Buddha to become either a great king or a great spiritual teacher, of which King Suddhodana obviously desired the idea of a great king as a son. He was born on a full moon in the month of Wei, and Wesak is a festival that marks this. and he was born in Lumbini Forest, and there is a pilgrimage to the stupa where they walk around 3 times, recognizing the 3 jewels, Buddha, Dharma and Sangha. A sala branch bent over to support Queen Maya standing up with her almost painless birth. He walked 7 steps and 7 lotus flowers blossomed on his feet, symbolizing the enlightenment. When he spoke, he pointed to the heavens and down to the earth and said, "This is my last rebirth on this earth, as taught in the Pali Canon." He was raised for 29 years in a life of luxury, with 3 palaces, lotus ponds of many colours, and beautiful dancing ladies for his entertainment, also told in the Pali Canon. A very good quote about his life of luxury is he was delicately nurtured. His father sheltered him from all forms of dukkha, pain and suffering, like a man walked ahead of him, hiding leaves and hiding away sick animals. And he finally rejected his life of luxury after 29 years living it, after witnessing the 4 sights of which we'll talk about in the next session.